We can start with the background.
رقم 7 موجود عندنا ريفرنس تاعو CCPR56 ويتبع أيضا circular letter رقم
and the circular letter number
38 أعتقد
38, I believe.
اللجنة أو
And
الاجتماع القادم ال 56
the next meeting, 56, is requested
to consider the proposed guidelines
as set out in Appendix 1 and to provide general and specific comments on the document, including, and we remind in step 7, it is preceded by several actions and works in regard to these guidelines. Next slide.
فهو انطلق من CCPR 51. نحن الآن في CCPR 56.
So we are in CCPR 56 now.
والطلب
There was a request
فكرة إنه نقوم بتطوير معايير خاصة
develop
استخدام
criteria
الريفرنس ماتيريال
to use the reference materials of pesticides, and these are very costly. Sometimes they reach expiry date, but is it proved to remain valid for use? So CCPR decided to make EWG and made a discussion paper issued by Argentina and India, and then formed EWG. Then they worked on these guidelines for several cycles, and they made advances step by step with regard to different CPRs or through the EWG, who makes several meetings based on the platform. Sometimes there are meetings before the CCPR and so on, and lately in the last meeting there was support for these standards and general support for these standards, but in the previous cycle there were new proposals and refinement were needed, and incorporating provisions to cover next pesticide standard solution and were covered by these guidelines. They were proposed to be added. So next slide.
لما هذا حبيت فكرة قصة هون هذا circular letter الخاص ب
This is a circular letter
بهذا الايتم. Next slide
in regard to this item. Next slide please.
تم اقتراح
it was proposed
إضافة على هذا
an addition
على ما تم إعداده سابقا
to what was prepared previously. So as long as there is a proposal of addition shall be approved. Next slide. It shall be approved in the CAC. So the EWG was recomposed. The approvals are taken in the CCPR and then the CAC. When we have a new addition from pesticide mixed standard solutions, it was recomposed. The team was gathered from the previous CCPR to this CCPR. The guidelines are proposed in Appendix 1, which I needed to put an overview. So we have the preface talking about different topics like the cost of laboratories, even the waste of these materials, and regard to the delays when the laboratories receive the materials. Several countries are not able to have reference materials with validity that affected the abilities of countries that are unable or developing countries in the enforcement processes. So they have issues and challenges in the process of analysis and the results of analysis. In the objective, the same matter.
يعني تم تحديد
but
انه مثلا
it
انه
was determined.
to identify expired
For example,
reference
point
material
2,
with continued
in
stability
regard to
and
reference
purity
materials
through robust
and stability
analytical
and purity
protocols,
through robust
so
analytical
that
protocols,
such
so that
materials that retain their
such
purity
materials
as per
that
the reference
return their
material
purity as
document,
per the reference
even
material
after
document,
expiry can
even
continue
after
to be
expiry,
used
can continue to
as
be used as
reference
valid
material. هناك أيضا
reference
تأكيد على
materials.
إنه إحنا
There
دائما
is a
وأبدا
confirmation
هناك
also.
reference material document سوف
There is
يتم
always a
الاعتماد عليه
reference
حتى في
materials documents
في
that will be
guidelines هنا
relied
سوف
on.
يتم
Even in the
الاعتماد عليها
guidelines, they
مجموعة
will
من
be relied
القوانين.
on,
Next slide
and
please.
several other standards. Next.
السكوب معروف هو ال
This
reference
scope is very well
material that
known. Reference
are
materials
beyond their expiry dates. وأيضا تم تأكيد على
also, it
إنه
was
reference
confirmed
material that do
that
not
the
remain
reference
stable
materials
and do not show
do
acceptable
not
purity
maintain
during
stable, do
prolonged
not
storage
show
shall not be
acceptable
used by laboratories
purity, shall
for
not be used
pesticide
by
residue
laboratories
testing.
and pesticide
يعني هنا
residue
دائما
testing.
يدخل في هناك سكوب العام، بعد هناك
There is a general
يعني
scope,
هناك يتم يعني التخلص من
but
من الاعتبارات يعني
there are
الاكستريم، ما هي
several
الاشياء التي لن
extreme
يتم القبول
considerations,
بها مثل ما
or the
ذكرنا هون
matters will not be
that do not
accepted
show
as
acceptable
mentioned here.
purity.
They do not
ثم
show acceptable
بعد
purity.
ذلك تم التحدث على
Also, they
storage
tackled
conditions
the
والquantitative
storage
measurements اللي
condition
هم
and
أساسيين
measurements
للقيام بعمليات
that are
القياس
basics for
وقراءة النتائج إلى
making the
آخره.
assessment
Next
and
slide
measuring.
please.
Next.
هناك بس تفصيلتين هون كنا حدثنا عليهم
Here are
ضمن
two
فريق العمل
details
المصغر، إنه
among the
لا
small
يزال
work group.
مطلوب compliance
Still, it
مع
is requested
ISO
a compliance with ISO
17025 مثلا أو
17025 and
35 بالنسبة
17035
للريفرنس ماتيريال
for the
بروفايدر، لازم
reference
يكون
materials
certified.
provided.
فبالتالي يعني
There should be
إنه
35.
وهذا أظن تم من الاقتراحات. أنا
Also,
لاحظت إنه
they
من
were
الاقتراحات
proposed
الأولية
lately,
التي
and one of
تقدمت
the
بها
initial
مجموعة من
proposals
الدول إنه
by
لابد
a
يكون
group of
في
countries,
يعني
there
تجانس
should
أو
be
harmonization
some
مع
compliance and
الآيزو
harmonization
ستاندرز
along with the ISO
المقررة
standards
إن كانت
of these
للعمليات
topics
أو
of such purpose
للعمليات أو
for
للبروفايدرز
the processes
certification
and
providers
providers
themselves. Next slide please.
themselves. Next.
في criteria for storage conditions أيضا
There is
هناك
a
مجموعة
criteria for
كبيرة من
storage conditions.
الكرايتيريا.
There is a big
يعني
group of criteria.
مش غرضي نقرا منها، لكن تم أخذ
We
بعين
will not read
الاعتبار
them, but we took into
إنه
consideration
الظروف
that
البيئية التي
the
تحيط
environment
بعملية
conditions
تخزين الريفرنس ماتيريال
that
كيفية أخذ
affect
بعين
the
الاعتبار
storage of reference
degradation
materials,
اللي
we shall
ممكن
take into
تصير.
consideration
وأيضا
the
تم
degradation.
الاعتماد على الجايد
Also,
لاينز الاتحاد الأوروبي
we
سونتي
relied on the guidelines
2024
in
study referring
2024,
for up
SANTE,
to 15 years of
study
stability
referring to up
وup
to
of
15 years of
10 years
stability
for
of
in-stock
pesticide reference
solutions. يعني
standards
هذا
and up to
ربح
10 years for
الجايد
in-stock
لاينز هذه
solutions.
تمكن المختبرات انها تربح وقت
These
جيد
guidelines
في
enable
الستوك
laboratories to
مانجمنت
have enough
خلينا
time
نقول.
in the stock
Next slide
management.
please.
Next.
طيب بعد ذلك أهم جزء هو إنه
After
تم
that, the most
اقتراح
important
تو
part,
أبروتشز في
it was
الأول، بعدين زادوها أبروتش أخرى.
proposed
الأبروتش
two
رقم واحد
approaches,
ورقم
then two
ثلاثة
other,
نقراهم
one more
بالإنجليزي لأنه
approach,
صعب
the
نقرأ
one and third
ترجمهم.
one.
بالنسبة للأبروتش نمبر 1 comparing the stability of old or expired and new or inexpired pesticides reference standards. This is applicable to need standards of reference material and related stock solutions. نلقاوها هذه إنه هي يعني تشابه الابروتش رقم
That means it
3
is very similar to the
والتي
approach
بموجبها
3,
نعمل
based
verification
on
of
which
stability
we
of
made
mixed
the
pesticide
verification of
reference
stability of
material
mixed
standard
pesticide
solution
reference material
during
met standard
prolonged
solution during
storage.
prolonged
ولكن
storage.
بالنسبة للابروتش رقم 2
But
فإنها
for approach 2,
تخص verification of
it
purity
is
of
for the
need standards of
verification of
pesticide
purity of
reference
need
material
standards of
during
pesticide reference
prolonged
materials
storage.
during
بمعنى
prolonged storage.
need standards
Here we have
في
need
أوقات
standards
مطولة.
for
ثم بعد
prolonged
ذلك
periods.
بالنسبة للأبروتش رقم 1
Then
expiry
for
date
approach
of a
1, the
new
expiry date of new,
unexpired or expired
unexpired
are
or
determined
expired
simultaneously.
RMs are determined simultaneously.
يعني individual need standards مع stock solutions.
That means individual
بالنسبة
need
رقم 3
standards
أيضا
plus
similar
stock
to
solutions.
approach 1
For
but
3,
an internal
similar to
standard
approach 1,
may be
but an
used to
internal
compare the
standard
big
may be used
area
to
ratio of
compare
each reference material
the bigger
pesticide
ratio
in
of
new
reference
or
material
old
pesticides
literature. طبعا هذه
and
صراحة
old
خاصية
in new
دقيقة في
or
المختبرات
old. This is very
ولكنها
neat in laboratories,
يعني مفهومة بالنسبة
but
للأخصائيين في
understood
العمليات
for
التحليل
experts
analytical methods.
in
بالنسبة
analytical
للapproach
reviews.
رقم 2
For the approach
whenever
2,
a new reference material is
whenever a
brought
new
in by a
or
laboratory,
unexpired RM is
its
procured by
purity
an
is
laboratory,
monitored
its purity is
periodically
monitored
before and
periodically
after
before and after
expiry
expiry,
using
using the
the
same
same
analytical
analytical
conditions
conditions
as
as
mentioned in
mentioned
the
in the
reference
reference
material
material
document.
document. دائما عندما الرجوع إلى
Approach
reference
2
material
refer to
document
reference
ليأخذ منها
materials
بعض
document
البيانات ليتم
to take
القياس
some data
على
and information to measure
على
them
على ضوئها يعني. Next slide please.
to each other. Next.
التكملة هون بالنسبة للأبروتش
And
في الأمور
completion of
الخاصة
the approaches
طرق
in
التحليل
regard to the
المعتمدة بالنسبة
analytical
للأبروتش
means
معتمدة
approved
عدة
for
أنواع
approach 1.
من
Several
طرق
types are
التحليل
mentioned of analytical
HPLC
means:
في
HPLC,
LCMS
UV,
بينما
GC,
chromatography
FID, LCMS,
assay
MS,
فقط بالنسبة
indications
للأبروتش
for
رقم
the
2.
concentration
أيضا
good
تم
response.
اقتراح بالنسبة لكل
Approach
أبروتش
2,
عمليات
for every
حسابية
approach, it was
خاصة
proposed
بنوع
a
التمشي أو
mathematical
البروسيجر التي
mean
تم
in
الاعتماد
compliance to the
عليها. ودائما
procedure
نلقى
relied on.
الأبروش رقم 1 تشابه الأبروش رقم 3
The
وهذا مما
approach
أدى
1 is
إلى
very
أن
similar
بعض
to 3.
الدول
This led to
كانت عبرت على أنه
several
هي
countries
ما تراش داعي للأبروش رقم 3 فإنها تكون لأنها شبيهة
expressed
جدا جدا في
there is
البروتوكول بالأبروش
no need
رقم
to mention
1.
that they are very
Next slide
similar in the
please.
protocol of approach 1. Next.
أيضا حبيت أذكر أنه هناك
Also, I
هناك
needed to mention
مقترح من الاتحاد الأوروبي
there
يخص
is a
درجات
proposal
حرارة
by EU in
التخزين
regard to
والتي
the temperature of
عندما
storage
يتم تحديدها بشكل
when
معين
determined in a specific
وهناك
way.
من لاحظ هذا الجدول يعطي مقارنة بين
This
الفريج
table
4
makes
روم
a
تمبرتشر
comparison
والفريزر
of room
فأيضا هذا كان
temperatures and
مقترح من
freezer.
الاتحاد يعني
It is proposed by
للموافقة
EU
عليه من قبل
to be
الدول.
approved by the countries.
وأظني السلايد الأخير
I believe
بالنسبة
the last slide
لهذا الآيتم. Next slide
of this
please.
item.
صراحة هذا تم يعني
Frankly,
أنا أضفته بناء على
I added it
توصية
based on
صراحة من
a
الدكتور
recommendation by Dr.
دكتور سامي
Sami
من مصر كان تحدث في
from Egypt.
الاجتماع
He
الداخلي
spoke
للفريق
during
على
a meeting
انه
of the team
اهميه
about
الهارمونيزيشن
the
مع الايزو
importance of
17434
harmonization with ISO
1425 حتى لا يتم تحميل المختبرات
1724 in order not
بردن
to
او عبء
make a
مالي
burden on
حتى
the
في
laboratories
الامبلمنتيشن
at the cost
نفسها
level and even in the
بتاع هذا
implementation itself
الجايد لاينز وحتى
of
انه
these
المختبرات ما
guidelines,
تكونش
and the
عندها
laboratories not
تضارب او تكون
to
عندها
have
عبء حتى
contradiction
تبين
or
من
more
الجهه
burdens to show to the
المقدمه
entity providing
للتوثيق او الاكريديتيشن
the
انها تطلب
documentation
منها
or
انها
accreditation
تتبع الجايد لاينز نتاع
that they
الجود
are
كودكس
under
في نفس
the
الوقت
guidelines of Codex
الجايد
at the
لاينز
same time,
نتاع
the guidelines
الايزو
of
to
the
avoid
ISO,
the burden of evidence to
to avoid the burden
accreditation.
of evidence of accreditation.
والحقيقه انا يعني ادعو زملائي اذا كان عندهم اي
I
سؤال
invite
ممكن
my
الدكتور
colleagues, if you have an
يكون
inquiry or question,
اكثر علم مني
the doctor will
بهذه
be more
الاشياء
aware
الدقيقه
of
جدا.
these
اظن
issues.
انتهى البند الى هذا الحد.
I reached
شكرا
the end of my
جزيلا على
presentation. Thank you
انتباهكم.
very much.
يمكن فقط حبيت نعم يمكن حبيت بس
Just
اذكر
I needed to
المشاركين
remind the
في الالكترونيك
participants
وركينج جروب انه في
in the
غدا
EWG
حتى انا ذكرت
that
الان
tomorrow
غدا في اجتماع
we
للفريق
have
الذي يقوم
meetings of
بتطبيق هذه
working group
الجايد لاينز الساعة
in
1
regard to
بتوقيت
these guidelines at
الأوروبي
1
علشان يعني
European
يربحون
time
وقت لحتى تكون الجايد
in
لاينز
order to have
أكثر
enough time
شمولية
for the
لهناك
guidelines
اعتماد
to
من
be
السي سي
more
بي آر.
prepared to be
دكتور
adopted by
أشرف
the
أنا
CCPR.
نطقت
Dr.
الاسم
Ashraf.
دكتور أشرف أشكر
So
لك
Dr.
الدعم اللي
Ashraf
كنت
is the
قدمته هناك
correct
في
name.
الاجتماع
Thank you
السابق.
for all the support during the past meeting.
شكرا.